Margaret had always believed that elegance came from understanding, rather than appearances. She stood in the marble lobby of Hartwell Industries, watching the morning light dance across the grand piano that had been her late husband's final gift to the company. The Steinway sat like a sleeping giant in the center of the atrium, its polished surface reflecting the crystal chandelier above. For 3 years since Robert's passing, the piano had remained untouched, despite Margaret's quiet hope that someone might bring it back to life. As the new CEO, she had inherited more than just a company. She had inherited Robert's dreams, his kindness, and his belief that beauty should be shared, not hoarded. The employees hurried past each morning, barely, glancing at the magnificent instrument. Margaret often wondered if they saw it as merely decoration, or if, like her, they felt the weight of its silence. Thomas had worked the night shift at Hartwell Industries for nearly 15 years. His weathered hands had mopped these floors and polished these windows through countless quiet hours, when the building belonged only to him and his thoughts. At 62, he had learned to find contentment in honest work and simple pleasures. Most people barely noticed him as he moved through the halls with his cart. He preferred it that way. The invisibility of his position allowed him to observe without judgment, to appreciate the small moments that others missed. He had watched 3 CEOs come and go each, bringing their own vision of progress. But Margaret was different. She remembered his name. She asked about his grandchildren. She understood that respect wasn't something you earned through titles, but through how you treated others on a particularly quiet Thursday evening. As Thomas polished the area around the piano, he paused to really look at it. The instrument was beautiful, even in its silence. He could see the reflection of his tired face in its glossy surface. His fingers traced the air above, the keys imagining the music that once filled this space. Thomas had learned piano as a child. His mother had insisted, despite their modest means, that music would give him something no one could ever take away. She had been right through years of struggle and disappointment, through raising children and losing his beloved wife. The piano had been his sanctuary. He hadn't played in months, not since selling his old upright to help with his daughter's medical bills. But muscle memory ran deeper than time. Margaret often worked late, finding solace in the quiet building where she could think without interruption. On this particular evening, she had stayed to review quarterly reports when she heard something that made her pause. Music was drifting through the halls, not the recorded melodies from the elevator or the soft jazz from the cafeteria sound system. This was different. This was Chopin. She set down her papers and followed the sound down the corridor toward the lobby. The melody grew clearer as she approached. It was the minute waltz, played with a gentleness that spoke of understanding, rather than technical precision. Each note seemed to float in the air, before giving way to the next. Margaret stopped at the entrance to the lobby, her breath catching in her throat. There at the piano sat Thomas, the night janitor. His work uniform looked oddly formal in the soft light. His hands moved across the keys with surprising grace. His eyes were closed, as if he were somewhere else entirely. The music filled the vast space, transforming it from a corporate lobby into something sacred. Margaret found herself remembering Robert. How he used to play this same piece on Sunday mornings when the house was quiet. How music had been their shared language when words weren't enough. She watched Thomas play and felt something she hadn't experienced since Robert's death. A sense of coming home. When the last note faded, Thomas opened his eyes and saw her standing there. The color drained from his face. His hands fell to his lap. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have. I was just..." Margaret raised her hand gently, stopping his apology. She walked slowly across the marble floor, her heels clicking softly in the silence. "Thomas," she said, her voice warm with something approaching wonder, "how long have you been playing?" "Since I was 7, ma'am. My mother taught me." She said music was the one thing that could make any place feel like home. Margaret nodded, understanding, flooding her heart. "That was beautiful." "What? You just played it was one of my husband's favorites." Thomas looked down at the keys, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I remember him playing sometimes when I worked the day shift years ago. He was very good." "Yes, he was." Margaret's voice carried The weight of memory. He always said this piano was meant to be played, not admired. He would have loved hearing you just now. The silence stretched between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that comes when two people recognize something true in each other. Thomas, Margaret said finally, would you mind if I joined you? I haven't played in quite some time, but I think I remember a thing or two. His eyes widened in surprise. Ma'am, I don't think that would be appropriate. Why not? Margaret asked, settling beside him on the bench. Music doesn't care about job titles or office hierarchies. It only cares about whether you're listening. She placed her fingers on the keys and began the opening notes of Für Elise, her technique. It was rusty, but the emotion was there. Thomas listened, recognizing not just the melody but the longing beneath it. When she finished, he began a simple accompaniment, and together they found their way into a gentle duet. Neither spoke about the unusualness of the moment, a CEO and a janitor sharing a piano bench in an empty office building. Sometimes the most profound connections happen when we stop thinking about what separates us and start feeling what binds us together. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the building. Margaret began staying late more often, not for work but for music. Thomas would finish his cleaning duties and find his way to the piano. They developed an unspoken routine. She would arrive with 2 cups of coffee from the break room. He would be waiting with sheet music he had copied from the library. They talked about their children, their losses, their dreams. Music gave them permission to be vulnerable in a way that corporate life rarely allowed. Margaret learned that Thomas had once dreamed of being a music teacher. Thomas discovered that Margaret had given up her own musical aspirations when Robert's career demanded her full attention. Neither regretted their choices, but both found healing in this unexpected second chance. The other employees began to notice the changes. Margaret seemed lighter, more present in meetings. Her decisions carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. Thomas moved through his duties with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Some of the younger staff started greeting him by name. A few even asked about the music they sometimes heard echoing through the halls. Word of the evening concerts spread quietly through the company, not as gossip, but as something precious that people wanted. To protect, several employees mentioned that they had learned piano as children. A few admitted they missed playing. Margaret had an idea. At the next company meeting, she stood before her employees with unusual nervousness. I want to talk to you about something that might seem unconventional, she began. This company was built on the belief that success comes not just from profit margins but from understanding that we are all human beings first. She gestured toward the lobby where the piano waited. That instrument has been silent for too long. I'd like to propose something I'm calling Music Hour. Every Thursday evening from 6 to 7, anyone who plays or wants to learn is welcome to join us. The response was immediate. Martha, from accounting, mentioned her violin gathering dust at home. David, from IT, admitted he had always wanted to learn piano. Sarah, from Human Resources, had played flute in high school. Within a month, Thursday evenings at Hartwell Industries became something extraordinary. The lobby filled with music and laughter. Employees who had worked side by side for years discovered shared passions. The piano was no longer the centerpiece but part of an ensemble. Margaret watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. But it was Thomas she noticed most. The man who had spent years invisible had become the gentle heart of their musical community. He encouraged beginners with patience. He shared simple arrangements that made complex pieces accessible. He helped others find their voices, just as his mother had helped him find his one Thursday evening. As the last notes of a group rendition of Moon River faded away, Margaret found herself remembering something Robert used to say: music is proof that beauty multiplies when it's shared. She looked around the room at faces glowing with accomplishment and connection, at Thomas, who was helping a nervous new employee find middle C on the piano, at colleagues who had discovered friendship through shared melodies. The evening had started with a janitor playing Chopin in an empty lobby. It had grown into something that touched every corner of their work family. As people began to pack up their instruments and head home, Margaret lingered by the piano. Thomas was wiping down the keys with the same care he brought to all his work. "Thomas," she said, "I want you to know that what we've built here, it started with your courage to play when you thought no one was listening." He looked up from his task, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears, Mrs. Hartwell. "I never thought at my age, I never thought I'd find my way back to music, let alone help others find theirs. Music doesn't age, Thomas. Neither does kindness, and you've given us both." The lobby grew quiet around. Then the chandeliers dimmed automatically as the building settled into evening mode, but the piano seemed to hold the echo of all the music it had witnessed, all the connections at H.